2-0 down, and it's an upward fight for England from here. Will it be 5-0, or will they pull off the impossible and make it 3-2? Let's discuss Perth and Brisbane as we look ahead to the third test at Adelaide in the Ashes series. So this is the first of our Ashes special podcasts. This was supposed to be the second, but I think after Perth, everyone was a little bit shell-shocked, myself included, and trying to organise thoughts became a bit of a mess, and then Brisbane was upon us, and then Brisbane happened. So this just felt like a good time to reflect, look back, just kind of have a talk about what is going on in the Ashes, give a little bit of a hint or a look into what comes next with the final 3 tests that will be coming, and announce that I will be doing the final 2 podcasts, well, technically final 3, reflection on Adelaide, reflection on Melbourne, and reflection on Sydney from Australia, because I am incredibly lucky to be travelling for the final 2 tests of the series. Quietly hoping there's still something to fight for by the time I get out to Australia, but I think that really depends on England's batting lineup. So let's just take a look at Perth and Brisbane, and then look ahead to Adelaide, look ahead to conditions, look ahead to teams, because there's been a lot of changes and a lot of discussion about changes in the last week or so in the lead up to the third test, which obviously is do or die for England now. One more loss, and that is game over. The Ashes not only stay with Australia, but they are won once again by Australia at home, fortifying them for another 3 years as unbeaten in the Ashes at home. Perth was such a whirlwind of a game because it all happened so quickly. And I think as well, a lot of people found the test very draining, very emotional, very high intensity, purely because if you are watching from the UK like I am at the moment, it is early hours, you are not getting a lot of sleep, and no sleep plus very disappointing end to that test match, it doesn't equate to a good reaction. I think there was some people reacting to it I personally felt was a little bit extreme in terms of I wouldn't have called it a humiliation. Although, having said that, upon reflection, and as we look to Brisbane and then start picking apart the England Test team, and a problem that seems to have only really reared its head now, but when you start looking back through the England Test team record of recent, it does show that this is not a new problem they're having. So we'll talk about that in more detail as we get to it. But yeah, Perth was such a whirlwind, and the ebbs and flows of that game happened so fast. It was almost like the game was on fast forward. From England batting first and then being out for 172 before we'd even hit tea in the first day, and everyone being like, gosh, this is complete collapse, complete travesty, complete mistake, all the bad things. And then suddenly we've had 19 wickets taken in a day. Australia are only 120 odd. England are way ahead of the game again. It was such a ebb and flow game. And to be frank, the England bowling group in that first test in Perth were outstanding. Best I've ever seen them play. Best attack that's ever been in Australia for a very long time as well, maybe ever. They just bowled the right length, the perfect line. They had it on a string. It was so okay. It was literally that kind of the fight you see from this England team, where it's like, okay, well, if that team can do it, if the opposition can do it, we so can do it too. So hold my drink, I'm gonna go do it as well. Put them so far in front of the game again, or it kind of just nullified the poor first innings, right? And you sat there thinking, and it was reminiscent to the India game last year that happened at the same ground, where Australia bowled India out really fast in their first innings, and then they also collapsed in their first innings, and then India went on to put a big score that Australia could then never chase down, winning that first test. And you kind of sat there thinking, well, if England can do that too, they must have learnt from that first innings, right? They're not going to keep driving on the up, right? They're not going to keep playing to 7th stump, right? They're going to learn from all of the mistakes they made in that first innings, and they're going to bed in, and they're going to play smarter. It was a bowler-friendly wicket, I think. And then there were runs to be got out of it, but I do still think the conditions were more in favour of bowling than batting, even though it was a good batting wicket. And as well, because the game was over so fast, the wicket just never had any time to deteriorate. Should they have scored more? Yes, because if they'd have scored more, they'd have won, right? But in the same breath, going into the final innings, England were ahead. They'd somehow managed to put 205 on the lead, which was the highest chase, the highest score that would have been scored in the entire game. It didn't look like that was possible with the ball doing what it was doing for the bowlers. And all England had to do was come out and do what they'd done in the first innings, and it was in the bag. And I think a lot of people felt very confident. I'd have said the favour was in England's side of the court when we were going into that fourth innings. I just don't think anyone expected Australia to open with Travis Head. And that has now become their mould, their attack. And the way Travis Head plays allows Jake Weatherall to have a lot more freedom and flexibility and takes the pressure off him. So he can take 20 balls, 40 balls to get in if he wants, but he can also really charge through the gears. And I think that was something pre-Ashes that Australia were very keen for, to have Weatherall in their top order and have him open, was that he had that ability to kind of turn on T20, if you will, if they needed to kind of reverse Bazball. I hate it, but it describes what we're talking about. Reverse Bazball the Bazballers, I think, was kind of the headline that came out of that. And you couldn't really disagree with it. It was straight out of the England Test playbook. We're behind the game. Let's do something they don't expect. Let's go out there and put the pressure straight on the opposition bowlers. And it's the first time I have ever seen Ben Stokes look lost captaining a cricket team. He just looked void of ideas. He looked like he didn't really know what to do, how to stop the flow. And then because they were scrambled and England was scrambled, well, then it was so much easier to score. And like I said, the test wicket wasn't bad, and it certainly hadn't started deteriorating. So suddenly it was very easy to score those runs, and 205 suddenly looks like an incredibly easy target to catch. So Perth was a whirlwind, but I think the strong bowling attack from England in that first innings very much wallpapered over some cracks. You don't win test matches getting bowled out in 34 overs. There's a 90 over limit to a day for a reason, and a test match where innings are lasting maximum 45 overs is just, that's not test cricket, right? That's not, there's playing fast, there's playing ODI. That's basically what the game turned into. It was just an ODI. And it was a very strange game. Great cricket. 19 wickets fall in a day, that's insanity. But in the same breath, there's something there. And like I said, I don't blame the wicket. I don't blame the groundsman. I don't blame Perth. I don't blame any of that at all. I think the wicket was perfectly fine. And it was given an outstanding rating from the ICC, right? So it had to be a good wicket. And you could see when a batter got in and a batter got set, there were scores to be run. And you could see when a batter got in and a batter got set, there were runs to be scored. So it wasn't a bad wicket. Mitch Stark just came out with an absolute mission, and he was going to take all 20 England wickets on his own if he absolutely needed to. All of the talk and pressure about no Hazelwood, no Cummins, Stark on his own, young and experienced bowling lineup, all of the cracks showing. Is this the opportunity for England? Well, yes, it was the opportunity for England, and they certainly didn't take it. But that almost seemed to buoy Stark even more and be like, okay, you think that's going to stop me? You think it's going to deter me? Nah, mate, I know what I'm good at. And is now at this point, I think it was in that test, it was either that test or Brisbane, he became the highest wicket taker of a left arm quick. So you can't deny he's a thorn in England's side for sure. Even with the bat, if you look at Brisbane, which we'll get onto very shortly. So yeah, I don't blame the wicket. The fact England's inning was so fast is because they collapsed into a heap. The fact Australia's first innings was so fast was because England were able to apply that same pressure with the bowling group. But the test was so fast because England didn't stay out to bat. I think had Australia needed more on the ball, I don't believe there was a number they couldn't have caught. They had 3 days to do it. So even in that position, when you're on a wicket that looks like it's giving a lot to the bowlers, I think that was simply the case. It just gave a lot to the bowlers, and any bowler that could execute good line and length on that pitch was going to get lots of wickets, as we saw. But yeah, it just starts to show the biggest issue that England have and continued then to have in Brisbane. Once again, no Lyon this time for Australia, which was an interesting choice and not one that many people understood, including Nathan Lyon, especially on a pitch where for the day-night test, it's the daytime where the movement isn't really there with the pink ball. It doesn't do a lot. That's when you capitalise and score. That's when you want a frontline spinner to be able to hold up an end, stem the run flow, make sure runs aren't being got, not make it easy for batsmen to knock it to the boundary and not to rotate the strike, try and pick up some wickets, but if not, at least like contain the flow of runs, which is why it was such a choice to not play Nathan Lyon. But what it did prove was that Australia had located England's weakness in their batting and believed that with the bowlers they had without Lyon, they could optimize on that and expose it, which they very much did. I also think as well, both teams so far seem to be prioritizing batting. And Steve Smith did say before the series started that it wasn't easy for batsmen on these wickets nowadays. They change, they've been curated differently, yada yada. We've seen a lot of green pitches. Perth was incredibly green. I think they took 2 or 3 millimeters off that before the test actually started. But the day before, I was like, this looks like the outfield. It was so green. And the pictures I've seen of Adelaide as we build up to that test, that's also very green at the moment. And again, I expect them to take a couple of centimeters off that before we actually start play. But it does seem to be that Australia are going for green tops because they want to help the seamers. And, you know, if your seamers can get in and get going good, then the ball talks for them, especially off the green top pitches. So it didn't make sense at the time. Of course, had Australia have lost the day-night test in Brisbane, the question would have been asked more. And I'm sure Nathan Lyon would have been much more vocal about how he felt not being played in that test. But I also think that and it shows because they won, they knew what they were doing. Once again, England just didn't seem to learn from the mistakes of yesteryear and came out and did exactly the same things. I mean, 3 wickets in first overs in 3 innings is a very, very good stat for Mitch Starc. And, you know, I think when England made it through that first over in their second innings in Brisbane, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, just to not have that wicket tumble again so early. But the problem England have specifically is their wickets fall in clusters. If you watched the Australian innings, you saw the batsmen read the game, play the game situation. Okay, we're not scoring fast right now, but we're still here. And I think one of those pivotal points in that game was Starc and Scott Boland's partnership the morning of day 3, when they were able to stay at the crease long enough to make sure that when the final wicket fell, they were going into the twilight period with a brand new pink ball. And it isn't easy to play, especially England don't play day-night cricket. England don't play with the pink ball. They don't bowl with the pink ball. They don't bat with the pink ball. They have very little experience with the pink ball. Australia have a day-night test at least once every year. So, of course, they're more experienced. Of course, that's when you want to be optimising, especially for someone like Mitch Starc, who's a whiz with the pink ball in those conditions. And even if they hadn't put the extra 70-odd runs on that partnership put on, which definitely put England under the pump even more so than it normally would. But even if they'd only put on another 20, they still managed to play the game, bed in, and stay there long enough that they were bowling with that ball at the right and perfect time. And that is and has shown England's biggest weakness. It's not with their bowlers, who did bowl very poorly on day 2, I will just add. And, you know, sometimes you have an off day. That's fair enough. But can 4 bowlers have an off day at the same time for 2 hours and no one think, right, let's just regroup, let's rethink, what are we doing? If England keep going to the short ball ploy, I just feel like that's a bit predictable now, England. Australia might know you're going to try that. They probably won't play on the off, nick it off to slips like England are very good at doing. But there was from the top to middle order, apart from Stokes and Will Jacks, and we'll get onto Will Jackson in a minute because what a phenomenal game he had. Apart from them, nobody dug in. And of course, we saw Joe Root dig in, and we're going to just briefly mention this because, yay, Rooty's finally got his century down under, so everyone could stop going on about that. But he played the perfect innings. He played the innings that was needed, which was dig in. Don't try and hit the boundary every other ball. If you haven't hit a boundary in 6 balls, oh well, it's test cricket. And this seems to be... like England, they talk a lot about these 4 pillars they have. Chase the ball down really hard. Leave everything out on the field. Put the opposition under pressure when we can. Absorb when we need to. And they just don't absorb. And it has seemed and looked very one-dimensional, what we've seen from them thus far. Which, they're the best players in the country, right? They wouldn't be playing for England if they weren't. And it just seems to be predictable now. You know, if Crawley hits a boundary and then misses the next ball for the next boundary, he's going to go for the 3rd. So, bowl a bit wide, 5th line. You'll probably nick him off to slips. Bowl a bit short, he'll come down the ground, drive it, and you can catch it. He'll knock it straight down mid-off throat, right? I don't play cricket. Definitely not at a professional level. And if I can sit on my sofa and call that, if I can sit there and go, hey, if Ollie Pope hasn't hit a boundary in 5 balls, he will just charge whatever we bowl down the pitch. So just do a couple of tight ones at him, make sure they're dots for 4 or 5, and then he'll drive it, and then you just nick him off, and he'll just drive it straight to the off-field. And I think that's what's so frustrating, is that they're not falling for good balls. They're falling for traps that are being set for them, and they're falling for stupid shots. And I know there's been a heck of a lot of discourse within the team, obviously not public, but within the dressing room, where this has been addressed. Stokes was incredibly angry and frustrated at the end of that test in Brisbane. And I think it was kind of another opportunity missed, but in the same breath. I mean, everybody said at the end of day 1, for the average score of a first innings, the 330 odd that they had, and obviously they still had a wicket in hand, so that was going into the next day, but the 330 odd they ended on was above average for a first innings score on that wicket. But when the opposition come out and put 500 on the board, it doesn't feel like an above average score. It feels like you left a lot out there. You left a lot to be desired. And when you win the toss in that and you bat first, correct choice, and the whole reason you bat first then is to be able to manipulate when you get the ball, the new ball, under the lights, because that's when it's its most effective. And all we watched was Australia single-handedly dismantle that advantage because England's batters couldn't just dig in. And it just feels like they're all playing a limited over, quick fire, short brand of cricket. I mean, the India test went 5 days every test. But before that, you'd be lucky to get a full day of day 4 with the England squad. And that's not good stats. Yes, okay, you want to get a result. You either want it to be a win or draw. A win or a lose, not a draw. Fine, whatever. That's what you're playing for. Whatever. But it's test cricket. It's not limited over. You have 450 overs in pocket for a reason. You're not supposed to go out there and play your shots in 20 balls and go, whoopsie, I fell for 1. Now, every now and then, a good ball is balls, right? And you just have to put your hands off to that and go, do you know what? Fair cop. The ball that got Duckett in the 2nd innings was a shame because I felt like they were actually going, we need to dig in a little bit now. Duckett and Crawley, and they did really well in that passage of play before the tea lunch break, whatever it was. I called it the tea break because it was traditionally where the tea break is, but I think I don't remember what they were calling it, but I'm going to refer to it as the tea break. You know the one I mean, the 20-minute one before the last session. They'd bedded in well. They'd come out. They hadn't lost the wicket. They got 40 on the board without really trying for it as well. It just felt like finally someone cracked the code. Someone realised you don't have to go and be going at 6 and over in Test cricket. An average of 3 and over is not a problem, so long as you're still there. When he lost that wicket, it was a shame because that was the trigger point, and that just seems to be England's issue. And hopefully this is what they've rectified before we get to start Adelaide. But it just feels like they will go and they're like, okay, a wicket's just been lost. Momentum's with the other side. So what I'm going to do is drive him down the ground for 6. Yeah, we're going to knock him for 7 boundaries and 6 balls. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Get the pressure back off them. And that is not absorbing the pressure. That is a brute force trying to wrangle the game back into your hands. And it's just not how it works. Clearly proven. But if you look back to the India series as well in the summer, you see this pattern of England losing wickets in clusters. There's the time, Old Trafford, for example, England are way ahead of that game. There is absolutely no chance India will win that game. It'll be a draw or a loss. And if they lose the series and England win the series. And England can't pull that over the line. Gill, and I can't remember who his partner him at the moment off the top of my head. I don't have the notes in front of me, sorry. But Gill and his partner buckled in, sat down, planted like a tree, did not care if they scored 1 and over. Didn't matter because they were there and they were keeping the game alive and they were doing what they had to do to keep the series alive. And it feels like that message doesn't come across to some people. Stuart Broad made a really good comment, actually, I think, he's doing 7 coverage for the series. Well, I don't know if he's in Adelaide, actually, but he was doing it in Brisbane. And he said, for someone like Harry Brook, it just doesn't look like he reads the situation. Now, Brook is one of those players that will play his way. And he does epitomise everything that Bazball is. Play with freedom. Don't worry about the scoreboard. Just go and express yourself in the way you want to. And it has been very successful for him in the past. But when you come out to the crease and your team is 3 down with 7 on the board, the first thing you don't do is try and drive the ball for a 6. And he's come out and done press before Adelaide and basically admitted, yeah, they were terrible shots and I shouldn't have done it. And I need to learn to rein it in better. And that isn't to say go on the full defensive, pack away all those shots, put them away. It's to say, play them when it is appropriate to play them. I haven't seen Root play a Root scoop for a very long time. But when Archer and he were going mad in that final hour on day 2, out comes the Root scoop, goes for 6. Because that's the time to play that shot. You have to read the match situation. And it is England's biggest fall down at the moment. So hopefully the conversations that have been had between Brisbane and here when they were having their fun in Noosa, hopefully is enough to see a completely different team walk out to the crease later today. Because if that team doesn't show up, England will go 3 down, which will be disappointing because I go out for test 4. But they got to turn it around. They got to dig in. They got to start playing test cricket again and not limited over. You look at the teams they play against when England lose. They lose wickets in clusters. Oppositions don't do that. Oppositions do not lose wickets in clusters because the incoming batsman goes, the opposition team is up and up here. I'm going to try and stick around for a bit to kill that momentum so we don't go 5 down in 3 overs. We'll see. I'm still not convinced in Ollie Pope's inclusion in the squad as we move on to Brisbane. I understand why he is still there. Obviously, you don't want to upset the apple cart too much. You don't want to kick people while they're down in the same breath. You obviously don't have the faith that Bethel or someone else maybe moving Will Jacks up the order. You don't have the faith that that will be helpful or yield any kind of different result. The biggest problem with Ollie Pope is that if he can get through his first 30, he can stick it in because he's stuck it in to get there. It's his desperation to move the scoreboard and score big that sees his wicket fall and sees him very easy to bowl to. So we can only hope that he too has had a conversation like it clearly seems Brooke has had that conversation and puts those away. We could also do with having Crawley having had that conversation, and we could do with Duckett actually stepping up and making a bit more of an impact. I think his highest score at the moment is 42, which was in the first innings at Perth. Collectively he scored 25, if that. No, he didn't. He scored 15 in Brisbane because he went out for the golden duck in the first innings. So yeah, the biggest problem for England is their batting. and their inability to score big, even though they push for a batting lineup that goes very deep so they can score big, is that then puts a hell of a lot of pressure on the bowlers. And the bowlers then feel the ramifications of the poor batting lineup. And if they bowl badly, a bigger spotlight is shone on that because they're not defending enough. The other thing you can't do is drop 7 catches. You don't win test matches dropping 7 catches. I don't know what was going on with the England team on day 2, but it did not look like a team who wanted to level the series or wanted to win the Ashes. And I think that was predominantly what annoyed Stokes so much. When you listen to him his post-game interviews and stuff, that seemed to be his biggest bugbear, was that, you know, when you looked out and saw, I think it was day 3 morning when they had 2 or 3 wickets left to get and they just couldn't get them. The only 2 players on that field that really looked like they wanted them was Stokes and Root, the 2 players who have been in Australia before and lost multiple times series significantly down under. The 2 who very much will have the bit between their teeth and want to rewrite history. At the end of it, the situation for England is exactly the same as it was 2 weeks ago when they arrived in Australia, which was win 3 games. You win 3 games, you win the Ashes. But yeah, they got a lot to shuffle. This has been very England heavy, this episode, which I think first and foremost is because they are 2-0 down. And secondly, I don't think there's any point in hiding that it's the team I am supporting. So it's the team I focus on a lot more and stuff. But let's look to Brisbane. Let's have a look at some team changes we've got going on and some team news that's happening. Because firstly, Pat Cummins is back. He has been training and he's been with the team for the first 2 tests, but his back injury that he picked up in the summer, our summer, UK summer, prevented him from being match ready, match fit. Smith said before Brisbane that Cummins was nearly ready to be back. And I think at that point, everyone just expected him to be back for Adelaide for this test 3. He obviously hasn't bowled competitively now for a good 6 or 7 months. I don't believe he's a bowler that needs that much time in the middle to get going. As an England fan, I hope he does, and I hope he has a bit of difficulty finding his length and line, but he's a very good bowler, and it just adds to the difficulty of the equation that England now have with both Stark and Cummins coming back in. I do believe if Australia win this test, they will definitely rest Stark for the next one. They might have to anyway, because even in the field and stuff, he's been going off a lot. He's been looking like a bit sore and tender. He's only been bowling 5 over spells. Like, he is mid-30s now, and looking at the twilight period of his career, albeit still bowling incredibly well. It is a little bit of protect. It's a protection situation for him. So we will see how much more of an impact Stark plays after this. Both teams have announced their start 11s prior to the toss and the beginning of the game, so we're all aware of who's playing. Cummins comes in, Lyon also comes back in. They replace Doggett and Nessa, who had very good games in Brisbane, but yeah, obviously they were gonna move. The younger bowlers were always gonna move out the way for the more senior ones when they were coming back in. It is interesting though, because it does mean that Inglis remains in the Australian start 11, which means they too are focusing on batting depth. And that does indeed take us on to Will Jacks, who has been in the centre of a lot of talking points. Not in a bad way, because he played so well in Brisbane. He absolutely earned the right to stay in the squad. And quite frankly, I feel more comfortable he's there because he proved he will dig in when he needs to, batting for 3.5 hours with Stokes. And at that point, it was just, you know, when the good ball comes, it's got your name on it. What can you do? If you've dug in for 3 hours and you both put 50 odd on the board and you've got 6 wickets in hand and you've still got batsmen to come, it's so much easier. Anyway, but yes, he takes the position. There is no frontline spinner on the England squad, with only one change coming in. Josh Tongue coming in for Gus Atkinson. Is Atkinson the bowler you would have replaced? Your most economical bowler thus far? No, he's been light on wickets, sure. Has he been unlucky with beaten edges, drop catches? Yeah, debatably, yes. Clearly, there's something in cast that Stokes wants in the team. There's an X factor there. Short ball. Wouldn't keep getting him to bowl that. But we'll see what happens. Tong's obviously made an absolute name for himself in the summer when he came in and cleaned out the tail of India twice. Which absolutely helped to England's win in Headingley. So there's definitely, they're prioritizing on having bowlers there that can take wickets, bowlers there that have the X factor. That's something that's slightly different. Tong is very quick, very nippy, very, when he gets his length and line in, he can be pretty destructive. So I can understand why he's come in. I'm just not, potentially wouldn't have replaced Atkinson, maybe would have replaced Cass with Tong. And obviously Bashir misses out because Jax is taking the position of the spinner. Now, I kind of agree with this because if you are focusing on having a good batting depth, you need people that can bat. Bashir is good at spinning, and England have put a lot of time, effort, and energy into kind of getting him ready for this series, which is why it's a little surprising. Come Test 3, he has not played yet, but he can't bat. And it is a weakness. Knowing that the top order can completely not fire, would you prefer to be able to bat down to 11, or are you comfortable batting to 10? And from what I've heard, what I've read, Jax and Bashir have been bowling very similarly to very similar effect in the nets. So they've opted with batting depth over a full-time spinner. And obviously they've got Root, they've got Brooke as well, who can spin, but the less we talk about Harry Brooke bowling, the better. And obviously the sad news for England is that Mark Wood is out of the rest of the series, which is a shame because there would have definitely been a workload management between Wood and Archer. And now that kind of replace of express pace with express pace is not available. It's absolutely gutting for Wood, who done everything right and everything to get back ready and fit for this series. But self-admittedly from him, after bowling in Perth, he knew that something wasn't right. And I got to be honest, the knee operation hasn't seemed to be right since it happened, because every time Wood's bowled long spells or just spells, it's swollen up again. And he was supposed to come back for India, but he did some bowling in the lunch break on one of the days at Lord's, and then the next day he had to have his knee drained again, which is why he never made it to the India series. And he was supposed to do some bowling for Durham in the county championship between the India series and the Ashes, but he never did that because he'd bowled some practice overs and his knee swelled again. So something doesn't seem to be right with that. And he, as I said, self-admittedly, he said he knew while he was bowling at Perth something wasn't right. It's just an absolute shame. And I really hope it's not the last we see of Wood in an England shirt. Obviously, he's 35 now. So again, one of these players that looks at the twilight of your career, but you never want to see people forced out of the game through to injury, especially someone with such a prolific career as Wood as well. So everyone here is wishing speedy recovery for Wood, that he comes back and is bowling rockets again, hopefully next summer for England, back when the domestic international season begins. The other one that is ruled out now is Josh Hazlewood from Australia's side, which is a bit of a blow for them. But if I'm Australia, I'm feeling confident that the replacement young bowlers that are waiting in the wings, young with quotation marks, but the replacement bowlers that are waiting in the wings can absolutely fill the role. And obviously, if you've got Cummins back now as well, that just bolsters the bowling lineup. But yes, it started with a hamstring strain, I believe, from Hazlewood. And then during his rehab for that, he got Achilles pain. And therefore, they've kind of put the brakes on the express rehab. And he also will not take any part in the Ashes series either. Speaking on express rehab, is the only thing that's potentially a cause for concern for Cummins, is that he was doing press today and admitted that usually recovery from his injury would be 4 or 5 months, but they absolutely expressed it to make sure he was available for most, if not some part of the Ashes. But what that, I'm not trying to suggest something might go wrong, but we saw Stokes do this with his hamstring last summer and have to pull out and then have to go for more surgery and stuff. I obviously don't wish anyone to get an injury. Of course not. It's the last way you want to see people at the game. You want to see the best players playing the best players, especially in a series like this. But it is a little cause for concern that he has powered through a fast rehab, which may see him not firing at his best. We'll see. We'll see when play starts and he starts bowling, and, you know, if he takes 4 wickets in 3 balls, then he'll be proving me wrong, won't he? But you know, it's not, like I said, it's not, the Cricket Australia clearly have no concerns. Cummins clearly has no concerns, but it's just something to have in the back of your mind. Maybe a glimmer of hope for the England fans who are staring down the barrel of quite the comeback, if indeed it happens. But that's kind of it for me from today, as we prepare for Adelaide. The time of recording, that's going to happen in a few hours from now. Yay. Back to early starts. For anyone who is watching from the UK, it's 11:30 p.m. is first ball every day. That is from the 16th of December, which is Tuesday, which is today, because obviously we're 11 hours behind them in Adelaide, so their 10:30 start in the morning is 11:30 p.m. the day before here. But it's 11:30 every day p.m. and then it should finish up by 7ish the next morning. But that is what we have for you from Around the Stumps today. Please do let me know your thoughts, feelings, and anything else down in the comments about the Ashes series, about the prospects, about if you think England can do it. Can they turn it round? Has Stokes' motivational talks and chatter of no weak men in my dressing room done the trick? Will we have a 2023 Ashes turnaround like we did when England were 2 down a couple of years ago back home? All remains to be seen. I'm very nervous and will continue to be so until a result has been decided, which I'm still hoping is on day 5 in Sydney, with the final wicket falling to Ben Stokes as England claim the Ashes. What a story that would be, and I'll be there, so that'll be even better. But that's what we got today. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back after the 3rd test from Australia, so in a different setup. If you do watch these visually, to a different setup to that. If not, I'll possibly sound a little bit differently because I'll have my on-the-go recording equipment rather than this lovely setup I have here. But until Adelaide is done, when we have the result that will either be 2-1, 2-0 or 3-0, I will speak to you then. Till then, happy watching the Ashes. Hopefully it's not too stressful. Hopefully we have some cracking cricket and we see another Rooty century.